Today I'm going to try to bake the classic sourdough bread by Chad Robertson, the Tartine Country Bread. And, oh yeah, I'll compare it to my master recipe. Hi, I'm Sune, and I'm a food geek. Today I'm going to bake the famous Tartine Country Bread, and I'll bake my master recipe alongside it and we can see what differences there are. The Tartine Country Bread is by many considered to be the holy grail of sourdough bread. The recipe stems from a book, Tartine Bread, which was released in 2010. I'm sure we all owe Mr. Robertson a debt of gratitude for bringing sourdough bread back into the modern world. I was originally inspired by Maurizio from The Perfect Loaf, and I know that he started out baking this particular loaf. We've all come far, I'm sure. Now I have my own method of making sourdough bread, which tries to make things as simple as possible. So how does my method differ from the Tartine bread? Well, for starters, I use just a starter. I don't prepare levain. You can even use a dormant starter if you want. Also, in my method, I mix everything from the beginning instead of waiting with the salt. In the Tartine bread, the bread is mixed with warm water and folded 4 times while keeping the dough warm. This means that the fermentation will get a kick in the butt early on. My method, on the other hand, uses room temperature water and just 3 folds, and then the doneness of the fermentation is judged by the growth of the dough. To me, it seems like a more reproducible method. At this point, the recipes seem to merge and pretty much follow the same steps, including the need for a final proof or retard before the dough is ready to bake. If you're new to this channel, I bake a lot of sourdough bread and I make delicious food from all over the world. If you want to see more of this content, please join me by subscribing and ringing the bell so you won't miss any future videos. So in the Tartine bread, the flour used is 90% bread flour and 10% whole grain wheat flour. In my master recipe, I use 80% bread flour and 20% rye flour. So I think my bread will have a bit more taste and sourness when compared to the Tartine bread. I usually bake my master recipe with 80% hydration. The Tartine bread is 77.5, so also pretty high hydration and not especially beginner friendly. The salt is 2% in both recipes and the inoculation is also about the same, around 20%. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider becoming a member at Patreon. You can also buy some merch or use the links in the description for tools and ingredients. Those were the words. This is me trying to bake the Tartine Country Bread. First, I mix everything for the Tartine bread except for the salt and 50 grams of reserved water. And then I let the dough rest for 40 minutes as a fermental release. And then I mix everything from my recipe, which is all of the ingredients. I let the dough rest for an hour, which, while it's not called that, serves the same purpose as auto-lease. And then when the tartine is ready, I mix in the salt using the reserved water.
I put the dough in the proofer set to 26 degrees Celsius, just shy of 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and let it rest for 30 minutes. While that's going on, I do my first set of stretch and folds of my own recipe. I let it rest for 30 minutes. And then it's time to do the first set of stretch and folds for the tartine dough. I let the dough rest for 30 minutes, still in the proofer. Then I do the second set of stretch and folds for my own recipe. I let the dough rest for 30 minutes. Then the second set of stretch and folds for the tartine bread. Another 30-minute warm rest. And then the last set of stretch and folds for my recipe. A quick window pane reveals awesome gluten development. So I put the dough in my Cambro container and mark the top. I also mark where the 25% is, and then I leave the dough until it's grown. So while my recipe's dough is fermenting, I go on with the tartine bread. Then I do the third set of stretch and folds. Another 30 minutes warm rest, and then the fourth set of stretch and folds. I don't check the gluten development since it's not specified in the recipe, but the dough seems nice and puffy, so that's a good sign. Then I split the dough in half. And I pre-shape the dough into light balls. Then I let the dough rest for 30 minutes on the counter. Then I final shape the two boules into batards. The recipe states to put a mixture of rice flour and whole grain wheat flour on the bread, but for the sake of comparison, I will skip this step. Then I put the shaped dough into the fridge. Then about an hour later, my dough has finished fermentation. Remember, the tartine dough had warm water and a proofer. Since the proofer was in use with the tartine dough, I couldn't do my regular 30-degree proof, so that probably explains the longer fermentation time. Then I divided the dough into two. Pre-shaped it. And then final shaped it into batards. Then I let all the dough rest until the next morning. The next morning I heat my oven and I grab a tartine dough from the fridge. Score it. And then I bake it. After 30 minutes, I reveal the bread and turn down the oven. Nice oven spring. And after 15 minutes, I remove the bread from the oven. And I put the bread to cool off on a wire rack. The other tartine dough was baked the exact same way. Then it's time to bake my recipe. I grab the dough from the fridge. Score it. And then I bake it for 20 minutes with the lid on my Challenger. After 20 minutes, I reveal it. Then I turn down the oven and bake for 25 minutes more. After the 25 minutes are over, I take the bread from the oven and let it cool on a wire rack. The other bread was baked the same way. Now let's compare the results. First, the Tartine Country Bread. That's an excellent crumb. Then my master recipe. Also very nice and open. Notice how the rye made the crumb much darker. Let's see them both together. Alright, now it's time for the good old sniff and taste test. Tangy. Delicious. They really smell quite the same. There's a hint of rye in the smell in my master recipe, but I'm not sure I would have noticed if I had had it by itself. Alright, let me taste them. Very nice flavor. It's a really good sourdough bread. Wow, that's great. This bread is more sour and has a distinct flavor of rye. Very lovely. If you had switched them around flour-wise, I'm sure the taste would be opposite. Both methods produced wonderful results, albeit the tartine recipe requires a bit more hands-on time.
So, interestingly enough, these breads are very similar. Both oven spring, crust and crumb are very comparable. The biggest difference is in the taste. The rye flour brings my recipe extra sourness and a delicious taste to the bread. Don't get me wrong, the tartine bread is delicious too, but I just love that touch of rye. I hope you learned something today. See you next time.